Alien Queen's little daughter never walked, until she saw the human janitor do something amazing. The mop handle cracked against the corridor floor at 4:30, and Davin Reyes did not flinch. He picked it up, checked the joint, decided it would hold another shift, and kept moving. The Keshari Civic Transit Hub Sublevel 3, the maintenance corridor that wrapped the eastern passenger concourse like a gray spine, smelled of recycled air and the faint chemical sweetness of Keshari cleaning solution, which Davin had learned over 14 months to tolerate, then ignore, then almost like. He worked the mop in long arcs, the way his grandmother had taught him on a kitchen floor in Guadalajara when he was 8 years old. Overlap every stroke by a third, never leave a dry tongue at the edges, push the water forward rather than chasing it. His grandmother had said a job done halfway was a job done to nobody. Davin had carried that into 2 years of infantry service, 3 years of freight hauling on the outer ring, and now 14 months of night shift facility maintenance at one of the largest transit hubs in the Keshari interior districts. He was not unhappy. That was the part people seemed unable to believe when they asked. The Keshari staff who worked the administrative level nodded to him in corridors. A few of the transit officers had learned his name. One of the overnight customs inspectors, a tall woman named Vareth with silver-streaked hair and a habit of reading technical manifests during her breaks, had brought him a sealed container of something warm and spiced on his first winter shift, saying only that humans lost body heat faster than Keshari, and that the hub's heating was calibrated for Keshari biology. He had thanked her in the 12 words of Keshari standard he knew at the time. She had smiled at the pronunciation and said nothing corrective. He had studied harder after that. Now he knew enough to hold a simple conversation, enough to read the maintenance request board without assistance, enough to apologize when his cart clipped a passenger's luggage, and explain that the sublevel drainage channel near Corridor 7 needed its 3rd inspection this month, and could someone please log that as a recurring fault rather than a one-time incident. The hub's facility manager, a compact Keshari man named Torvin who communicated almost exclusively in margin annotations, had written asterisk competent and thorough in Davin's last quarterly review and underlined both words. Davin had kept the paper. He was mopping the eastern branch of Sublevel 3 when he heard the wheels. Not the heavy-wheeled cargo platforms that ran the freight channels, not the maintenance carts, something smaller, with a quieter bearing and a slightly uneven roll that suggested one wheel was carrying more weight than the others. He recognized it after a moment as the sound of a mobility chair. He did not stop mopping. The concourse above was open to civilian foot traffic from 400, and the sublevel service corridor had an accessible passage at the northern end that connected to the family waiting area. It was not unusual for a passenger to come through early. The chair rounded the corner, and Davin looked up. She was very small, that was the first thing. Even accounting for the chair, which was a Keshari standard adult model sized down to a child's frame with an aftermarket cushion tied at the back with a blue cord, she was small 4, maybe 5 years old, with the pale luminescent blue-gray skin of the interior district Keshari, and enormous amber eyes that caught the corridor lighting and held it. Her hair was dark silver-black, the same color as deep water, cut short and tucked behind ears that came to a gentle, rounded point. She wore a plain gray tunic and soft indoor shoes that had never touched ground. She was alone. Davin looked past her down the corridor. No adult, no escort. He looked at the northern passage. The accessible gate was open, its lock panel showing green, which meant someone with access credentials had opened it from the other side and either hadn't followed through or had been briefly separated. He did not panic. Children who appeared alone in transit hubs were almost always not alone. A parent had stepped to a service window. A guardian had paused at a departure board. Someone was 30 seconds behind and moving fast. He set his mop against the wall, walked to the cart, and crouched down so he was at eye level with the child, the way his sister had taught him when she'd had her first, because adults who loomed were adults who frightened. The girl stared at him. Davin had been stared at in the Keshari interior districts before. Humans were uncommon here, not prohibited, not unwelcome, just statistically sparse enough that his face and coloring drew a second look from most people and a sustained study from children. He was used to it. He waited. She said something in Keshari standard, fast and high-pitched. His Keshari was good enough for maintenance requests and corridor apologies. It was not good enough for a 5-year-old talking at full speed. He caught 2 words, where asterisk and the thing with the water. He glanced at the mop. Then back at her. The mop, he said in Keshari standard, pointing. Her eyes tracked to the mop and back to him, and she said, more slowly this time, with the exaggerated care of a child who had decided an adult was not very quick. The thing, with the water. How does it work? It was not a question. It was a statement of requirement. Davin picked up the mop, held it out toward her so she could see the head, and said, "You push the water in front of you like this." He demonstrated a slow arc on the dry section of floor beside him. It picks up the dirt, then you wring it out. He moved the mop to the wheeled bucket, pressed the pedal on the wringer, showed her the dirty water running out. She watched all of it with an intensity that reminded him of Varith reading a technical manifest. Nothing performing, nothing polite, pure information intake. "Again," she said. He did it again. She watched the full cycle twice, wet mop to floor, arc, bucket, wringer, water. Then she sat back slightly in her chair as if recalibrating. "The pattern," she said, "you overlap." "By a third," he said, "every stroke." She looked at the floor where he'd mopped. Her amber eyes tracked the overlapping arcs that were still faintly visible in the damp surface. "The edges," she said. "You push forward, don't chase the water." She thought about this for what seemed to Davin a genuinely disproportionate amount of time for a 5-year-old considering mopping technique. Then she said, "What is your name?" "Davin," he said. "Davin," she repeated, testing the sounds. It came out as 3 clean syllables, slightly more formal than the way he said it himself. "I am Riva." "Hello, Riva." "Hello," she paused. "You are a human." "I am." "You clean the floor." "I do." "My mother says humans are uncommon in the interior districts," Riva said. "She says most humans prefer the outer ring because the transit connections are faster." "Your mother is right," Davin said. "I like it here, though." Riva considered him. Why? It was a reasonable question. He thought about it honestly. "The people are straightforward," he said, "and the hub has a good drainage system. I appreciate a good drainage system." Riva looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "That is a strange reason." "Probably," he agreed. The sound of footsteps came from the northern passage, not fast, not running, but with a precision of stride that was different from a panicked parent. Davin looked up. A figure appeared at the passage entrance. A Keshari woman in plain clothes, moving with an economy of motion that he recognized, in some unexamined part of his soldier's brain, as the walk of someone who had a great deal of practice at not drawing attention, and was not very good at hiding it, because the quality of the not drawing attention was itself noticeable. She was tall, with the same deep luminescent blue-gray skin as the girl and the same dark silver-black hair, worn loose to her shoulders. Wide-set deep amber eyes. She was wearing what looked like ordinary civilian clothes, a structured gray jacket, dark trousers, but they fit with the precise drape of something that had been made for her specifically, and the jacket's collar carried a small insignia that Davin's Keshari was good enough to recognize as a district seal, but not detailed enough to read. She was looking at the girl, then she looked at Davin. He was crouched on a maintenance corridor floor holding a mop, at 4:30, having a conversation about drainage systems with a 5-year-old. He stood up, set the mop against the cart, and said in Keshari standard, "She came through the North Passage." I was ensuring she was not alone. The woman's expression did not change significantly, but something shifted behind her eyes, a recalibration of the kind Riva had done after the mopping demonstration, except this one was faster and covered more variables. "Thank you," she said. Her Keshari standard was flat and neutral in a way that was itself a form of disguise. "Riva." "Mother," said Riva without turning her chair. "He overlaps the strokes by a third." "Does he?" "He says you push the water forward, you do not chase it." "That is good technique," the woman said. "I asked him why he works here," Riva continued. "He says he likes the drainage system." The woman looked at Davin again. "The sub-level 3 Eastern Drainage Channel has a recurring fault," she said. It was stated the way Varath stated things, not asking, observing. "Third inspection this month," Davin said. "I've logged it as a recurring fault rather than a one-time incident. The channel lining near Junction 7 has a hairline fracture. It needs a full section replacement, not repeated patching." A brief pause. "You assess the junction yourself," she said. "I'm down there enough to notice patterns," he said. She looked at him for a moment that was a fraction longer than it needed to be. Then she said, "I will see that it is reviewed." Davin nodded. He would believe it when he saw it. Transit facility maintenance promises had a long and inconsistent track record in his experience, but he thanked her anyway. She moved past him to Riva's chair and rested a hand briefly on the girl's shoulder. Riva reached up without looking and pressed her mother's hand once, quick and certain, the gesture of a child who does this constantly without thinking about it. "We should return," the woman said. "In a moment," Riva said. She was looking at the mop. "Davin, show her." "Riva," the woman said. "Show her the ringer part," Riva said. "She hasn't seen the ringer." Davin looked at the woman. The woman looked at the mop. He had the impression she was computing the cost of several options simultaneously and choosing the least disruptive one. "Show me the ringer," she said. He showed her the ringer. They came back the following morning. He was working Corridor 4, the longer western branch, which ran alongside the passenger luggage storage and always carried a faint smell of off-world freight containers. When he heard the chair wheels again, the slightly uneven roll, and looked up to find Riva positioned at the far end of the corridor with her amber eyes already fixed on him. The woman, her mother, was 3 steps behind, in different plain clothes, the same quality of fit. "You are in a different corridor," Riva said. "Different corridor every shift," Davin said. "Rotating schedule keeps the coverage even." Riva absorbed this. "What is today's drainage situation?" "Corridor 4 is fine. Junction system is a newer installation. No fractures." Riva appeared mildly disappointed by the adequacy of the Corridor 4 junction system. She navigated her chair along the wall. She operated it with one hand and a small wrist control, and she was very good at it, precise in tight spaces, and came to a stop beside his cart. "You said yesterday that you were in the infantry," she said. Davin tried to remember if he had said that. He thought he had mentioned the outer ring freight work and maybe something about his grandmother, but not the infantry. "I was," he said, "before the freight work, before this." "What did you do in the infantry?" "Moved things from one place to another," he said. "Made sure the people I was responsible for got where they needed to go." "Did they?" He thought about the answer honestly, the way he'd tried to answer her mother's question about the drainage system. "Most of them," he said. Riva turned this over. "How long?" 2 years. Then the freight. 3 years. Then here. 14 months. She looked at him with the same flat assessment she'd given the mop's operating cycle. "You do not seem like someone who moves from thing to thing," she said. Davin blinked. He was not sure what he had expected from a 5-year-old's analysis of his employment history, but that had not been it. "I'm not," he said after a moment. "Things moved around me." Riva nodded as if this was the correct answer. She looked at her mother, who had remained at the corridor entrance. "He says things moved around him," she said. "I heard," her mother said. "That is why he is good at the drainage system," Riva said, with the certainty of someone who had just solved a problem. "He does not move from things. He notices when things move." Her mother said nothing, but she was looking at Davin with the same recalibration expression, and this time it was slower. They came back for 11 mornings. Davin did not ask why. He had learned, in 14 months at the Keshari Civic Transit Hub, that asking why was often less useful than simply paying attention to what was in front of him. What was in front of him, on 11 consecutive mornings, was a 5-year-old named Riva who had opinions about drainage systems, junction maintenance cycles, the proper overlap ratio for a mopped corridor, and the question of why humans apparently had a significantly higher tolerance for temperature variation than Keshari. On the 3rd morning, she brought a small notebook and began recording things he said. He did not comment on this. On the 5th morning, she told him that her legs did not work the way other children's legs worked. She said it the way she said most things, without preamble, without apparent distress, as a data point being offered for relevant context. "They never have," she said. "It is a development condition. The neural pathways did not form correctly. My physicians say it is not painful. It is simply that the signal does not reach correctly." Davin kept mopping. "Does it bother you?" he said. "No," she said immediately. Then, after a pause, "Sometimes, when I see other children running in the concourse, not because I want to run, because running looks," she stopped, searched for the word. "Loud," she said finally, "in a way I do not know." He thought about that. "Like a frequency you can't quite hear," he said. She looked at him sharply. "Yes," she said, "exactly that." He kept mopping, she kept watching. "My mother worries," Riva said on the 6th morning. This was offered in the same data point manner, but it was quieter. "She tries not to let me see it, but she is very precise about the physicians. About the therapy schedule, about the chair." She looked at the chair. "She chose every component herself. She researched the bearing systems for 3 months. She found the aftermarket cushion from a manufacturer on the outer ring." A pause. "I know the cushion cord is blue because blue is my favorite color." Davin did not say anything. He wrung out the mop and kept working. "She is not very good at letting people see that she worries," Riva said. "She is better at fixing things." "That sounds familiar," Davin said. Riva looked at him. "You also do not show worry well." "I also fix things," he said, "whether they want to be fixed or not." Riva thought about this. "The drainage channel at Junction 7, she said. "3rd inspection," he said, "still pending the section replacement." "I know," she said. "My mother expedited the review. The replacement is scheduled for the 15th. Davin stopped mopping. "The 15th, he said. "She said you assessed it correctly, the hairline fracture. She had an engineer verify your access report." He looked at the girl. She was watching him with her precise amber eyes, notebook in her lap, pen still. He had the sudden, distinct sense that she was showing him something, not telling him something, but showing him, the way he had shown her the mop and the wringer. "Here is a thing. Watch the mechanism. See how it works." He went back to mopping. "Thank you," he said, "for telling me." "You would have noticed when the repair crew arrived," she said. "I just moved the information forward, like the water." He looked at her. She looked at him. "You are very strange," he said, with no particular emphasis. "Yes," she agreed. "My mother says I am precise." "That's a kind word for it." She wrote something in her notebook. He suspected it was his exact words. He found he did not mind. On the 9th morning, Davin arrived at sublevel 3 to find that someone had replaced the joint on his mop handle. It was a clean installation, the same fitting as the original, but new, without the hairline stress crack he had been working around for 3 months. There was no note. The hub's facility manager Torvin communicated in margin annotations, not gifts. This had not come through the maintenance supply requisition queue because Davin had never filed one for it. He had simply been managing the crack. He stood there for a moment, mop in hand, in the empty 430 corridor. Then he attached the head, tested the joint, found it solid and started mopping. On the 11th morning, Riva came alone. Her mother was not 3 steps behind. The northern passage gate was open, the same green panel, and the chair wheels made their familiar slightly uneven roll, but there was no second set of footsteps. Davin looked up, checked the corridor, looked at Riva. "She is at the passage entrance," Riva said. "She is giving me distance. She says that I asked for it and she is honoring the request." She paused. "She is also watching." Davin had no doubt about that. "Okay," he said. Riva navigated to her usual position beside the cart. She had her notebook. She had the pen. She looked at them for a moment, and then she put both in the seat pocket beside her leg, and she sat with her hands in her lap, and she looked at Davin differently than she normally looked at him. "I want to ask you something," she said, "and I want you to answer as if I am not 5. He leaned on the mop. "You've been doing that for 11 days, he said. "I haven't stopped." "I know," she said. "I am checking." She looked at her hands. "My mother, is she?" She stopped, started again. "Does she seem like someone who is afraid?" He thought about the woman who had appeared at the northern passage entrance on the first morning. The precise stride, the recalibration behind her eyes, the hand on Riva's shoulder, Riva's hand pressing back. "No," he said. Riva looked at him. "She seems like someone who has already thought through every bad outcome," he said, "and decided what she will do about each one. That is not the same as not afraid, but it is a different relationship with fear than most people have." Riva was quiet for a long moment. "She sits outside my medical appointments," she said. "Everyone. She does not come in unless I ask. She says it is because I am old enough to have my own relationship with my physicians, but she is always there. I have timed it. She has never once not been there." "Yes," Davin said. "I do not know how to make her less afraid," Riva said. Her voice was steady, but it had the quality of something that had been made steady through effort. "I have tried to be very good at the things I can do, the notebooks, the patterns, the junction analysis. I thought if I was very competent at many things, she would see that the legs were," a pause, "that the legs were only one thing." Davin thought about his platoon. He thought about what it meant to watch someone you were responsible for go somewhere you couldn't follow. "She knows that," he said. "She has known that since the first morning." "How do you know?" "Because she comes back every morning," he said. "Not to watch over you, to see what you're going to notice next." Riva looked at him for a long time. Her amber eyes were very steady, the way her voice had been steady, the way her mother's stride was steady. "I am going to try something," she said. "I want you to keep mopping, do not stop. Whatever happens, keep mopping." He did not know what she meant. He nodded. She put both hands on the armrests of the chair. He kept mopping, slow arc, overlap by a third, push forward, don't chase. He heard the small sounds of the mobility chairs lock disengaging. He did not look up. He mopped. He heard a sharp breath. He mopped. He heard, very quietly, the sound of something that was not the chair wheels. He mopped, his grandmother's floor, his grandmother's voice. "Push forward. Don't look back at what you've already covered, look at what's still in front of you." The sound came again. A footstep. One foot, then a pause, a breath, a stillness that had the quality of something enormous gathering, then a second foot. He mopped. He counted the strokes. He overlapped by a third. The corridor floor in front of him was clean and damp, and he kept moving into it. And behind him, one step at a time, something was walking. He reached the end of the corridor section. He stopped. He turned around, because there was no more floor to do and he had to turn around eventually, and because 14 months of working in this hub had taught him that sometimes the most important thing a person could do for another person was simply be a witness. Riva was standing. She was 6 feet from her chair. Her hands were out from her sides, the way a person held their arms on a wire above the ground, and her face had an expression he had never seen on it in 11 mornings. Not the precise analytical attention, not the considered data-point delivery, not the careful steadiness. This was something rawer and quieter and more private than all of those, the face of someone in the middle of something that had never happened before. She was looking at the floor in front of her. Then she looked up and she looked at him and she took one more step. The sound from the northern passage entrance was very quiet. He did not look that way. He kept looking at Riva. The overlap, he said, and his voice came out steadier than he expected. By a third. Riva looked at the floor, at the damp arcs of the mopped corridor, each one overlapping the last by a third, moving forward, not chasing what was behind. She took another step. Davin did not learn who the woman was for 3 more days. He would think about that later and find it characteristic of her, of this district, of the specific quality of the 11 mornings, that the revelation arrived not as a dramatic disclosure, but as a series of small contextual facts that assembled themselves without ceremony. On the 12th morning, the hub's facility manager Torvin appeared in sublevel 3 at 4:30, which had never happened in 14 months. He was carrying a printed form and looking at Davin with an expression that Davin associated with the aftermath of a formal inspection. "There is an access review for sublevel 3, Torvin said, without preamble, because Torvin did everything without preamble. Effective today, non-maintenance personnel will require an escort for the northern passage. The accessible gate will have a secondary credential check." Davin looked at the gate. "The family waiting area access will be maintained. The secondary credential check will be waived for registered dependents." Torvin paused. "And for persons escorting registered dependents." He handed Davin the form. It was a standard access protocol update, the kind that came down from facility administration, which received its directives from hub management, which received its directives from district oversight. Davin read it. At the top, where the authorization signature went, there was a district seal. He could read the seal now. His Keshari had improved enough over 14 months. It was the seal of the governing sovereign of the Keshari interior districts. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at Torvin. Torvin, who communicated in margin annotations, who wrote asterisk competent and thorough, and underlined both words, had the expression of a man who was going to say nothing, and was managing this with some effort. "The junction replacement," Davin said. "Sublevel 3, junction 7. Scheduled for the 15th, Torvin said. "Expedited review. The authorization came through district oversight." He paused. "The access report you filed was cited as the diagnostic basis." Davin folded the access protocol form. "Okay," he said. "The new mop handle fitting," Torvin said, with the tone of someone completing an accounting rather than offering new information. "That also came through district oversight. Requisition was flagged as a facility welfare item. Approved same day." He looked at the mop. "I mention it because the approval pathway was unusual, and I prefer to have accurate maintenance records." "I understand," Davin said. Torvin nodded. He turned to leave. Then he stopped, and with the manner of someone adding a footnote to a document that was otherwise complete, he said, "She has not sat in the chair since day 12. He left. Davin stood in the corridor for a moment. The northern passage gate showed green. The hub was beginning its slow pre-dawn accumulation of sound, the freight lifts starting their morning cycle, the overhead ventilation shifting to day settings, the first passenger announcements running from the upper concourse. He picked up the mop and started working. She came on the 14th morning. Alone. No child. The northern passage gate opened and she came through it without the civilian clothes, without the studied plainness of the previous mornings. She was in a working jacket of deep charcoal gray with the district seal at the collar, not the small civilian-grade insignia he had half noticed before, but the full formal version, 3 interlocking marks in silver thread, which his Keshari was now good enough to read completely. She was taller than he had registered when she was performing ordinary. Her bearing, without the performance, was different, not aggressive, not imperious, but the bearing of someone who had spent so long being the weight-bearing structure for a very large number of things that it had become simply how she stood. She stopped 6 feet from him. Davin set the mop against the wall. He thought about what a person did when they were standing in a maintenance corridor at 4:30, and the governing sovereign of the Keshari interior districts walked in without ceremony, and he decided that what a person did was look at her directly and wait. "I owe you an accurate accounting," she said. Her Keshari standard, without the disguise, was precise and warm in a way the flat civilian register had not been. "You have been in an unusual situation for 14 mornings, and you have handled it with more composure than I had any right to expect." "I didn't know it was an unusual situation," Davin said. "I thought it was a morning." "Yes," she said, "that is the part I want to account for." She looked at the corridor, at the damp floor, at the mop handle joint, which was solid and new. "My daughter does not give her attention easily," she said. "She has a comprehensive sensory vocabulary, and she uses it to assess everything she encounters, and she does not spend time on things that do not reward the assessment. She gave you 11 mornings of her attention." "She was interested in the drainage system," Davin said. "She was interested in the drainage system for approximately the first morning," the sovereign said. "After that she was interested in you." He didn't say anything. "She told me on the 4th morning," she said, "that you answer questions as if she is not 5. She found this significant. She has a list of the adults who do this. It is a very short list." She paused. He waited. "I have watched my daughter not walk for 5 years," she said. "I have watched 17 physicians give me assessments, and 2 of them give me hope, and none of them give me certainty. I have watched her build a comprehensive intelligence out of everything her body would not give her, and I have been very afraid for a very long time in the way that people who fix things are afraid, quietly and in advance, and mostly by identifying every problem before it arrives." She looked at him. "She told me what you said about that, about fear." He remembered, a different relationship with fear than most people have. "I am not going to tell you what I felt on the 12th morning," she said. "I do not have adequate language for it. I was at the passage entrance. I watched my daughter stand up from her chair and walk 6 feet of maintenance corridor, and take one more step, because a human janitor was mopping a floor with enough steadiness that it seemed like a reasonable thing to do." The ventilation system shifted. The first freight lift chimed somewhere above them. "I want to thank you," she said. "Not for fixing something, for not fixing something, for mopping a floor and letting her find her own forward." Davin looked at the floor. The overlapping arcs were still faintly visible in the damp surface. "She did that," he said, "not me." "Yes," the sovereign said. "That is the correct answer, and it is also why I am here saying thank you and not simply having district administration send a commendation form." She paused. "Which I was also going to do, the commendation form. I have already drafted it." "Torvin will annotate it," Davin said. Something crossed her face, not quite a smile, but the space where a smile would go in someone who was not currently performing plainness. "I expect he will." She reached into her jacket pocket and produced a small folded card. She held it out. He took it. It was a district contact card, formal, with the full seal and a secondary number handwritten in the corner in the kind of precise, small script that matched a person who researched bearing systems for 3 months. "The junction replacement on the 15th, she said. "If the section they install does not address the hairline fracture pattern correctly, if the installation is a patch rather than a genuine fix, I would like to know." He looked at the card. "You want a maintenance report," he said. "I want an accurate maintenance report," she said, "from someone who does not move from things." He folded the card and put it in his work jacket pocket, next to the quarterly review that said competent and thorough, and had both words underlined. "I'll file it the same way," he said. "Recurring fault, not a one-time incident." "Good," she said. She turned to leave. Then she stopped, the way Torvin had stopped, and with the same character of adding a necessary footnote to a complete document, she said, "She is practicing the corridor, every morning. In the family waiting area. She has mapped the walking distance of every room on sub-level 3 from the access diagrams, and she is working through them in order. She'll be done with the eastern branch by next week," Davin said. "It's shorter." "Yes," the Sovereign said. "She mentioned that." She walked back through the northern passage, the gate closed, the green light held. Davin picked up the mop. On the 19th morning, the replacement crew arrived at Junction 7. They were a 4-person team from District Infrastructure Maintenance, carrying a full section replacement unit rather than a patch kit, which meant someone had read his access report carefully and acted on it rather than interpreting it as a more convenient problem. He watched them work for 15 minutes, assessed the installation approach, decided they knew what they were doing, and went back to Corridor 4. On the 20th morning, he filed a maintenance report that said, "Junction 7, Sublevel 3 Eastern Branch. Section replacement completed on the 15th. Installation assessed as full and correct. Fracture pattern addressed at the structural level, not patched. No recurring fault expected. Recommend a 6-month follow-up inspection to confirm seal integrity." He filed it through the regular maintenance request board. He also took a photo of the installation with the hub's maintenance documentation tablet and attached it. Then, because he had a handwritten card in his work jacket pocket, he sent a copy to the secondary number in the corner. The reply came back in 4 minutes. It said, "Noted, thank you." Then, after a pause that he suspected was not actually a pause but a deliberate decision, it said, "She walked to the end of the western branch this morning. She says the drainage there is adequate." He looked at the message for a moment. He sent back, told her it was a newer installation, no fractures. The reply came, "She said you would remember that." He put the documentation tablet back on the cart. The commendation form arrived on the 21st morning, filed through district administration, and delivered to Torvin, who placed it in Davin's equipment locker with a margin annotation on a sticky note that said, "For your records, T." The form was formal and precise, in the dense official prose of district acknowledgement documents, and it used words like asterisk exemplary conduct and exceptional care for the welfare of a district resident and services rendered with competence and genuine humanity. At the bottom, in the space where the governing sovereign's formal seal went, there was the 3-mark silver seal. Below the seal, in the small, precise handwriting that matched someone who researched bearing systems for 3 months, there was a single additional line that was not part of the standard commendation form. It said, "She has started asking about the western branch ceiling fixtures. She believes the maintenance interval is too long and would like to propose a revised schedule. I have told her to write it up. You may receive correspondence." Davin read this twice. Then he filed the form in the same place as the quarterly review, the inner pocket of his work jacket, next to the drainage assessment notes and the card, and he picked up the mop, and he went to work. At the end of Corridor 7, A small figure was waiting beside the western branch's first ceiling fixture, notebook open, pen ready, amber eyes already tracking his approach with the steady, assessing attention of someone who had measured the maintenance interval and found it wanting. She was standing. Davin walked to her, adjusted his grip on the mop handle and said, "What have you got?" Riva turned to her notebook. "The western branch has 11 ceiling fixtures," she said. "Current maintenance interval is 45 days. The fixture nearest the drainage junction shows surface oxidation consistent with moisture exposure at 30 days. The interval should be revised to 30 days for the first 3 fixtures and 45 days for the remainder." "Did you note the oxidation pattern?" "I drew it," she said, and showed him the notebook page, which had a precise diagram of the fixture housing with the oxidation areas marked in a different pen color. He studied it. "That's correct," he said. She nodded once, the way her mother nodded, brief and decisive. "I will write up the proposal. I will send it to Torvin. He'll annotate it." "I know," she said. "My mother says he is thorough." Davin started on the first fixture. Riva walked beside him, slowly and with concentration, one step at a time, her notebook open and her pen moving, and the western branch of sublevel 3 was clean and lit and quiet in the early morning, and ahead of them, 11 more ceiling fixtures waited to be correctly assessed. "Push forward, don't chase what's behind." Riva was walking. Davin had not told anyone back home about the conversations with Riva, not because he was keeping them exactly, but because they would have required more context than most people wanted to give a thing. His sister, who called on the last Sunday of every month over the long-range relay, would have wanted to know what the daughter of the governing sovereign of the Keshari interior districts was doing in a maintenance corridor at 4:30 talking about drainage systems. And Davin would have had to explain that he genuinely did not know. And then she would have wanted to know why he was not more concerned about not knowing, and that would have taken even longer to explain. He sent her a message on the 19th morning that said, "Still fine, hub is good." They fixed the junction. She sent back, "You and your junctions." He sent back a thumbs-up emoji that she had taught him to use when he didn't want to continue a conversation, and she sent back a picture of his niece, who was 3, and had recently discovered strong opinions about the color of her shoes. He looked at the picture for a while in the equipment locker room before his shift, eating his pre-shift meal of rice and the Keshari spiced grain his neighbor had given him a batch of, and which he had been working through for 2 weeks. His niece's shoes were orange. She looked like she had won something. He thought about Riva saying like a frequency you can't quite hear. He thought about what it meant to have a comprehensive intelligence built out of everything your body would not give you, and to be 5 years old, and to have figured out that your mother researched the bearing systems in your chair for 3 months before she told you about the blue cord on the cushion. He finished his meal, rinsed the container, and went to start his shift. The transit hub at 4:30 was a different creature than the hub at any other hour. The daytime version, from 800 to 2200, was a city in itself. 17 arrival platforms, 11 departure gates, the commercial concourse with its 43 vendors, the administrative tier, the customs processing hall, the family waiting areas and the transit lounges, and the staffed inquiry desks where Keshari transport officers in formal uniform answered questions with the particular patience of people who had answered the same 7 questions 10,000 times and had made a professional accommodation with it. The daytime hub was loud and lit and purposeful in the way that large pieces of infrastructure are purposeful, everything moving, everything with somewhere to go. At 4:30 the hub was its own bones. The freight systems ran. The overnight maintenance staff moved through the sublevels. A customs inspector was at her desk, Varath, or one of the 2 who traded the overnight shift with her, reading a manifest. The arrival board showed 2 incoming long haulers from the outer ring, not due until 6:15, and their status lights were steady green in the way that meant everything was on time and no one needed to panic. Davin liked this version of the hub. He had liked the quiet version of places for as long as he could remember. His grandmother's kitchen at 500, when she was already up and the coffee was already made, and the light came in sideways off the mountains and nothing had started yet. The freight bay at 200, when the hauler was locked in dock and the loading crew was asleep, and the only sound was the ship's cooling system settling. The infantry fob at 3:30, before the day's operations brief, when the whole compound was present and quiet and entirely itself. He had tried to explain this to Riva on the 7th morning. She had asked him why he worked nights. "I like the hub at this hour," he said. "It's more itself." She had considered this. "More itself," she repeated. "Things are what they are at 4:30. Nobody's performing." She had written that down. Then she had looked up and said, "My mother is more herself at 4:32. She paused. "She has meetings from 700 until sometimes 2100. She is always present in them, but she is arranged. Like the hub, at 4:30 she is not arranged." "Is that when she comes in here?" Davin said. "With you?" "She said I could not come alone," Riva said. "She said she would bring me in the early shift window before her day begins. So she gets up at 400 to bring you to a maintenance corridor." Riva looked at him. "Yes," she said, as if this were self-evident. Davin kept mopping. He thought about a woman who had been governing Sovereign for 12 years getting up at 400 to bring her daughter to a maintenance corridor because her daughter had asked. Because there was a human janitor there who overlapped his strokes by a third and answered questions as if she were not 5. "She didn't tell me who she was," he said. "Not accusatory, observational." "No," Riva said. "Did she think I'd treat you differently?" Riva looked at the notebook in her lap. "She said," Riva said carefully, "that she wanted to see what you were like when you did not know." She paused. "She also said she was not entirely sure she had made the right choice. She thought about it after the 3rd morning and she thought about changing the arrangement, but then she said you had not changed at all across 3 mornings, which was itself a form of information." Davin thought about this. "Smart woman," he said. "She is very smart," Riva said without pride or defensiveness, simply as a matter of record. "She is the smartest person I know, but she is also," she stopped. "She is very good at seeing what people are. She is not always good at letting people see what she is." Davin nodded. He had guessed that from the flat civilian register. From the way she had asked him about the drainage channel as if she were testing whether his answer would change now that she had weighed in. He hadn't been sure what the subtext was at the time. He was surer now. "She is learning," Riva said. "She told me so." She looked up from the notebook. "She said this corridor is," she said something that does not translate exactly. "It is a Keshari word. It means a place where things can be what they are before the day arranges them. She said she has not had a place like this in a long time." Davin mopped the last arc of the section and turned the cart. "She can keep coming," he said. "There are 11 more months on my contract." Riva wrote this down. The thing about the soft seed, the vibe Davin had pulled from 11 days of watching the girl and her mother without knowing who they were, was that it was nothing like what he'd had in the infantry. That had been a different kind of endurance. Purposeful, directed, with clear parameters and a chain of command, and the shared knowledge that the people around you had the same mission. This was something rawer. There were no parameters. There was no chain of command. There was only a corridor and a child, and the very old, very simple discipline of doing a job as correctly as it could be done, in the faith that correctness was its own kind of signal. He had learned that in the freight work, actually. The infantry had taught him to endure. The freight work had taught him something quieter, that showing up to a thing without drama, without spectacle, without requiring recognition for the showing up, was itself a form of strength that most people mistook for ordinariness because it did not announce itself. His freight crew chief, a woman named Halua who had worked the outer ring for 22 years and had very strong opinions about cable management and the correct torque specification for a cargo bay seal, had told him on his last shift before he left for Keshari, "You're not ordinary. You just look ordinary because you don't need anyone to know you're not." He had not known what to do with that at the time. He had thanked her and meant it and gotten on the transit shuttle and not thought about it again until Riva, on the fourth morning, had looked up from her notebook and said, "You are the same 3 mornings in a row." "Yes," he had said. "Most adults are different if they know I am watching," she had said. "They become," she had made a gesture with her pen, a small spiral, "more deliberate. They want to be seen a certain way. You mop the same." "I mop the same," he had agreed. Why? He had thought about Halua, about cable management, about the correct torque specification for a cargo bay seal, which was a thing Halua believed in with a conviction that he had come to understand was not really about the torque at all, but about the principle behind it, that a thing worth doing was worth doing to its actual specification, not to the specification of whoever was watching. "The floor doesn't care if I'm being watched," he said. "It's either clean or it isn't." Riva had written this down. He was becoming reasonably sure she was building some kind of analytical framework, and that he was one of the data points in it. He found he was comfortable with that. Being a data point in Riva's analytical framework seemed like a reasonable thing to be. On the 13th morning, the morning after Riva stood and walked 6 feet of maintenance corridor, Davin arrived at sublevel 3 to find that someone had cleaned the section ahead of him. Not poorly cleaned, not smeared, not the well-intentioned but technically incorrect clean of someone who did not know the overlap ratio. It was done correctly, every stroke overlapping by a third, the edges pushed forward, not chased. The ringing evidence in the bucket was the right color, properly dirty, meaning the floor had been properly dirty and the mop had correctly addressed it. And the mop itself was leaned against the wall with the head up, the way you were supposed to store it to let the fibers dry correctly. He stood in the doorway and looked at this for a long moment. Then he moved the mop from the wall to the cart, attached the handle, still solid, the new joint, and moved on to the section that had not been done. He filed it in his shift report as asterisk section, a pre-cleaned, source unknown, quality. Correct. Torvin, who annotated everything, annotated this with a single mark that was not a word, but that Davin, over 14 months, had learned to read as something between asterisk, noted asterisk, and of course. On the 14th morning, the morning the sovereign came without the civilian register, he had asked, before she gave her accounting. "The section," he said, "yesterday." She had looked at him. She wanted to try, she said. She did it correctly. She practiced on the family waiting area floor the night before with a wet cloth, she said. She timed herself to make sure she had the angle right. She paused. "She is 5. "I know," he said. "I want you to understand," she said, and her voice was doing something careful and precise that he recognized as the same thing his voice did when he was trying to keep it from doing a different thing entirely. What it meant that she did that. What it meant that she could do that. He understood. He did not say so out loud because it was not the kind of understanding that needed saying. Weeks later, 4 weeks, then 5, and the morning still came, and Riva still came with her notebook, and her mother sometimes came and sometimes did not, but the card in his work jacket pocket had now accumulated 7 messages and 7 replies. Davin filed his quarterly maintenance report. It was the same as every other quarterly maintenance report: drainage assessments, fixture intervals, cart service records, the status of every routine item on the sub-level maintenance schedule. He filed it through the regular board. Torvin would annotate it. It would go into the hub archive, where it would sit with every other quarterly maintenance report and be retrieved if anything needed verifying. At the end, after the last routine item, he added a single non-standard note. It was not required. It was not a standard field. He added it because he was thorough, and because thoroughness meant an accurate record of a thing as it actually was. Note, Sublevel 3 Eastern Branch, Corridor 4 Access Passage, mornings a condition consistently above standard. Reason, daily early shift attention by a district resident with a demonstrated interest in correct maintenance methodology. Her overlap ratio is precise. Her edge technique is correct. Recommend continued access. He submitted the report. The reply came from Torvin's account 20 minutes later, which was faster than Torvin usually annotated anything. It said only, noted, access continued T. Below Torvin's annotation, in small precise handwriting, someone had added a second note. It said she is asking about the northern branch ceiling fixtures now. I have told her to finish the western branch proposal first. She says she can do both. I have said we will see. TIV, K. He looked at the initials. TIV, K Thesara Roman 4 Kamath. The same form as Veth's mother's name in entry 350, but a different sovereign entirely, different district, different lineage, different everything. Just the same naming convention of the interior districts. The Roman 4 asterisk meaning asterisk of asterisk. The second name the district designation. He looked at the card in his pocket, TIV-K. He had been addressing the secondary number as asterisk sovereign in their exchanges. She had not corrected this. He had not been sure if that was protocol or preference. He was still not sure. He typed back, tell her the northern branch fixtures can wait. The western branch proposal needs supporting data on the 30-day oxidation cycle. Has she recorded 3 observation points yet, or just 1? The reply came back. 1. She says 1 is sufficient to establish a pattern. He typed, tell her a pattern requires a minimum of 3 observation points to distinguish pattern from anomaly. She'll need 2 more mornings of data before the proposal is defensible. A pause. Then, she says she will record the data, but she wants it on record that she believes 1 point is sufficient, and that the additional data is bureaucratic procedure rather than scientific necessity. He read this twice. He typed, tell her she is probably right, and that bureaucratic procedure and scientific necessity are frequently in conflict, and that a defensible proposal accounts for both regardless. A longer pause. Then she has written that down. She says this is the most useful thing you have told her that is not about drainage. He put the tablet down and went back to work. The blue cord on Riva's chair cushion was still there when she started walking. She did not remove it. He noticed this on the 23rd morning, when she navigated the chair to its usual position beside the cart, and then stood up from it and walked the corridor alongside him, still careful, still slow, still with the arms-out balance of someone for whom this was very new, while the chair sat at the cart with the blue cord exactly where her mother had tied it, vivid and exact. He did not say anything about the cord. On the 25th morning, she said, unprompted, while recording the second oxidation observation on the western branch fixture number 3, I am keeping the chair. My mother asked if I wanted a different one, now that the weights are different. I said no. Okay, Davin said. The cushion is the right height, she said. The bearing system is excellent. She researched it for 3 months. I know, he said. And the cord is the right color, she said, and her voice had the same quality it had on the 12th morning, the quiet private thing that was not the notebook voice or the analysis voice but the other one, the one underneath. He kept mopping. She kept walking. The cord was blue, vivid and exact, and the hub was at its most itself, and the floor was clean, and ahead of them the corridor went forward into the morning, and there was more of it than there was behind. Varith, the overnight customs inspector, asked him about it on the 28th morning when they crossed paths at the equipment locker room. She had a sealed container of the warm spiced drink, and she handed it to him without comment, which was her convention, and then she said, "The district sent a maintenance commendation to Torvin. First one I've seen in 8 years at this hub." "So I hear," Davin said. "I saw the child," Vareth said. "The small one, 3 weeks ago before the early access arrangement changed. She was in the northern passage asking one of the freight operators about the lift cycle timing. She had a notebook." "She's thorough," Davin said. Vareth looked at him with the expression she used when she was reading a manifest for the second time, because the first read had not added up. "The commendation form," she said, "used the phrase genuine humanity. That is not standard district administrative language." "Probably not," he agreed. She considered this. Then she said, "Do you know what the district acknowledgement means? The formal one, not the commendation form, the acknowledgement itself." He had read the commendation form carefully. He had seen the seal and the formal language. He had seen the handwritten edition. He had not known the full weight of the formal acknowledgement. He had assumed it was a standard honor of some kind, and had not known enough Keshari administrative history to understand the scope of it. Vareth told him. She told him that the formal district acknowledgement of the interior districts had been issued, in documented history, 31 times in the 412 years since the district's governing structure was established. She told him what the issuance criteria were: not excellent service, not above standard performance, but a specific category of action that the founding governance documents described as *rendering genuine chain to the interior condition of the district itself. She told him that no human had received one before entry 351 in the district's records, and that Davin Ray's maintenance worker, sublevel 3 Eastern Branch, had received it not for saving a life in a dramatic exchange or for an act of conspicuous bravery, but for mopping a floor correctly for 11 consecutive mornings, while a child watched and learned something about what steadiness looked like when it was not performing. He sat with the warm container in his hands and let this settle into him, the way water settled into a properly cleaned floor rather than running off the edges. "Okay," he said. Vareth looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You are a very strange man, Rays." "Probably," he said. She left. He finished the drink, rinsed the container, returned it neatly to the equipment shelf, and went to start his shift. At the end of Corridor 7, Riva was already there, notebook open, recording the third observation on the Western Branch fixture number 3. She looked up when she heard his cart. 3 data points, she said. "Pattern confirmed. The proposal is now defensible." "Good," he said. "Write it up." She looked at the fixture, at her notebook, at him. "Davin," she said, "when your contract ends in 11 months, she paused, "what happens?" He had thought about this, in the way he thought about things he could not yet answer, held at the edge of his mind, available, not resolved. "I'll file a renewal," he said, "if Torvin wants to keep me." "Torvin's annotation on your last quarterly report said indispensable," Riva said, with 2 underlines. He blinked. "You read Torvin's annotations." "My mother shares the facility management summaries," she said, with the serenity of someone who sees nothing unusual about this. "She says an accurate picture of infrastructure requires the granular data." She looked at him. She also annotated the annotation. She wrote agree. He stood in the early morning corridor with his mop and looked at Riva, who was standing, and whose notebook was precise, and who had 3 good data points and a defensible proposal, and a blue cord on a chair cushion that she was keeping, because the bearing system was excellent. "I'll file the renewal," he said again. She wrote it down. "Good," she said, and turned back to the fixture, pen moving, recording the morning correctly, 1 observation at a time.